Year 1, failed. Captain Rachel Hayes sat in the flight simulator at Randolph Air Force Base, Texas, sweat soaking through her flight suit, nausea overwhelming her senses. The G-force simulation had triggered her vestibular disorder again. The room spun. She couldn't orient herself, couldn't tell up from down. The evaluator's voice came through her headset, clinical and detached. Spatial disorientation. Candidate cannot maintain aircraft control under combat G-loading. Recommendation: disqualification from pilot training. Rachel pulled off her helmet, hands shaking. This was supposed to be her dream. Top of her class at the Air Force Academy. Perfect scores on every written exam. She knew aircraft systems better than most of her instructors. She could recite fighter tactics manuals from memory. But knowing and doing were different things. And her body had betrayed her. She had a vestibular disorder, a problem with the inner ear that made her brain unable to process rapid changes in orientation. In everyday life, it was barely noticeable. But in a high-G fighter jet, pulling 9 GS in a tight turn, her body couldn't keep up. The world spun. She lost spatial awareness. And in a fighter jet, that meant death. "We'll try again next cycle," her instructor said, trying to be encouraging. Some people just need more time. But Rachel knew. She'd already tried everything. Medications, therapy, specialized training. Her body simply couldn't do what fighter pilots needed to do. Still, she refused to give up. "I'll be ready for the next evaluation," she said. Her voice steady despite the crushing disappointment. Year 2, failed. They tried again. New medications, new training protocols. Rachel studied harder, trained longer, pushed herself beyond every limit. She ran extra simulator hours, practiced emergency procedures until she could execute them in her sleep, did everything possible to compensate for what her body couldn't do naturally. But when the evaluation came, the same thing happened. Another high-G maneuver, another episode of vertigo, another disorientation, so severe she nearly crashed the simulator. Captain Hayes, the flight evaluation board, told her, "We appreciate your persistence. But pilot training isn't just about knowledge or determination. It requires physical capabilities you simply don't have. Perhaps it's time to consider other career paths." Rachel left the meeting feeling hollowed out. She'd wanted to be a pilot since she was 8 years old, watching F-16 scream overhead at an air show. She'd dedicated her entire life to this goal. Academy, training, sacrifice, all of it leading to this moment where her body said no, regardless of what her mind wanted. But she wasn't done yet. "One more try," she told her commander. "Please, just one more evaluation cycle." They agreed. One more chance. Year 3, failed. The third attempt was the hardest. Rachel knew it was her last shot. If she failed again, the Air Force would reassign her. Desk job, logistics, analysis, honorable positions far from any cockpit. She prepared like never before. 6 months of intensive training. Every spare moment in the simulator. She tried experimental treatments for her vestibular disorder. Nothing helped. The final evaluation came on a cold morning in November. Rachel climbed into the simulator, strapped in, and prayed that this time would be different. It wasn't. 40 minutes into the evaluation, during a simulated dogfight, the G-forces hit. The world tilted. Her brain lost orientation. She pulled the wrong direction, overcorrected, entered a spin she couldn't recover from. Simulation terminated, the evaluator said. Candidate has failed to meet minimum standards for pilot qualification. Rachel sat in the simulator long after everyone left, staring at the controls, trying not to cry. 3 years, 3 attempts, 3 failures. She was done. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Army Story so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? 2 weeks later, Colonel James Anderson called her into his office. "Captain Hayes, I've reviewed your file. Your knowledge of aircraft systems, tactics, and procedures is exceptional. Your written test scores are the highest we've seen in 5 years. But your body can't handle the physical demands of flying high-performance aircraft. Rachel nodded, waiting for the inevitable. The desk assignment. The end of her dream. However, Anderson continued, there's another position available. It's not traditional pilot work, but it might interest you. What kind of position, sir? Remotely piloted aircraft, RPAs. The 432nd Wing at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada. They operate MQ-9 Reaper drones in combat support roles. Rachel felt something twist in her chest. Drones. Everyone knew how the pilot community viewed drone operators. Not real pilots. Second class. Sitting in air-conditioned trailers instead of cockpits. Playing video games instead of flying real aircraft. Sir, I wanted to fly fighters. I know. But Captain, this is a chance to use your skills in a way where your body won't limit you. RPA operators do real work. Combat surveillance. Target acquisition. Close air support. It matters. Rachel looked down at her hands. Failed pilot. That's what she'd be known as. The academy graduate who couldn't handle the G-forces. The one who washed out. But the alternative was a desk. And, at least in an RPA, she'd be connected to combat operations. To real missions. To something that mattered. I'll take it, she said quietly. 6 weeks later, Captain Rachel Hayes arrived at Creech Air Force Base, Nevada, home of the 432nd Wing and the largest remotely piloted aircraft operations center in the Air Force. The base felt different from traditional fighter wings. No roaring jet engines on the flight line. No pilots in full flight gear striding toward their aircraft. Instead, rows of ground control stations, essentially trailers filled with screens and controls, where operators flew drones thousands of miles away in combat zones. Rachel was assigned to the 17th Reconnaissance Squadron, operating MQ-9 Reaper drones. The Reaper was an impressive machine, 36-foot wingspan, capable of flying for 14 hours continuously, equipped with advanced sensors and precision-guided munitions. But it wasn't a fighter jet, and Rachel wasn't a fighter pilot. Her instructor, Major Lisa Park, was patient but direct. Hayes, I know you came from the fighter pipeline. I know this isn't what you wanted, but if you're going to operate here, you need to leave that ego at the door. RPA operations require precision, patience, and a completely different skill set than flying fighters. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am, Rachel said. But inside, she felt the loss keenly. This wasn't flying. This was operating. And no matter what anyone said, it wasn't the same. Year 4, training. Rachel threw herself into RPA operations with the same intensity she'd brought to pilot training. But this time, her body wasn't the limiting factor. She learned the MQ-9 systems inside and out, studied sensor operations, weapons employment, communication protocols, practiced takeoffs and landings. Though the Reaper was controlled remotely, launch and recovery still required precision. But she didn't stop there. While other RPA operators treated the job as surveillance and reconnaissance, Rachel studied something different: close air support. She read JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller, manuals, memorized danger close procedures, watched combat footage of A-10s and F-16s, providing cover for troops on the ground. Why are you learning that? One of her fellow operators asked. We're not doing CAS missions. We're surveillance. Because I want to know what real pilots do in combat, Rachel said. She didn't add the rest, because I want to understand what I lost. But the real reason was deeper. Rachel was learning because she believed that piloting wasn't about where you sat. It was about what you could do. And if she could never sit in a fighter cockpit, she'd become the best at what she could do from a ground control station. She practiced precision weapons employment until her hands moved across the controls without conscious thought. Studied wind patterns, weapons ballistics, target identification. Learned how to coordinate with ground forces, how to read a battlefield, how to make split-second decisions that kept people alive. The other operators thought she was obsessive. Hayes, you're making the rest of us look bad. This is just a job. But to Rachel, it was never just a job. It was proof that she belonged in combat operations, even if she'd never be in a cockpit. 18 months into her RPA assignment, Rachel had become one of the most skilled operators in the wing. She had a reputation, Meticulous, tactical. Someone who thought like a fighter pilot even though she flew a drone. Major Park noticed, "Hayes, you're good at this. Better than most pilots who come through here. You should consider making this a career track." Rachel appreciated the compliment, but deep down, she still felt like a failed pilot playing a video game. The respect she wanted, the wings, the call sign, the recognition, would never come from flying a drone. She was wrong. Year 5, tested. The call came at 0347 hours on a cold October morning. Rachel was 6 hours into a routine reconnaissance mission over a contested area in the Middle East. Her MQ-9 Reaper circled at 20,000 feet, sensors scanning for enemy movement. Quiet, routine, boring. Then the radio crackled with an emergency call. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Viper 2-1 is hit. Repeat, Viper 2-1 is hit. Ejecting, ejecting, ejecting." Rachel sat forward immediately, her training kicking in. She pulled up the tactical overlay on her screen. An F-16 from the 64th Aggressor Squadron had been hit by a surface-to-air missile during a ground attack mission. The pilot had ejected. She checked the coordinates. Her Reaper was 180 kilometers away. The radio continued. Viper 2-1 on the ground. Multiple hostile forces converging on pilot location. Weather deteriorating. Rescue helicopter ETA 90 minutes. All manned aircraft are pulling back due to SAM threats. Rachel's heart sank. 90 minutes. The pilot didn't have 90 minutes. Enemy forces were already closing in. Colonel Richardson's voice came through her headset. "Reaper 3-6, what's your fuel status?" Rachel checked her instruments. "Sir, I have 11 hours of fuel remaining. I can be overhead the pilot's position in 42 minutes. Get there. Provide eyes on the pilot until rescue arrives." Rachel's hands moved across the controls. Her Reaper banked hard, engines pushing to maximum speed, racing toward the downed pilot. But as she flew, she realized something. Eyes on the pilot wouldn't be enough. The tactical overlay showed enemy armor. 3 vehicles, possibly tanks or APCs, moving directly toward the pilot's position. They'd reach him in less than 2 hours. The rescue helicopter would never make it in time. She opened the command channel. "Colonel Richardson, I need authorization for armed engagement." There was a pause. "Hayes, your RPA isn't configured for close air support in that environment. You're 400 kilometers away in Nevada. That pilot needs an A-10 or Apache, not a surveillance drone." "Sir, with respect, that pilot needs someone who can keep him alive until rescue arrives." "I can do that." Another pause. Longer this time. "Hayes, if you screw this up, that pilot dies." "I won't screw it up, sir. You have operational control. Don't make me regret this." Rachel took a breath. This was it. Everything she trained for. All the hours studying tactics, practicing weapons employment, learning what real pilots did in combat. Now she had to prove she could do it from a trailer in Nevada, 400 kilometers from a battlefield. 42 minutes later, Rachel's Reaper arrived overhead the pilot's position. Through her sensors, she could see him, Captain Marcus Webb, call sign Viper 2-1, huddled behind a small ridge about 800 meters from where his F-16 had crashed. He'd activated his survival radio. "Viper 2-1, this is Reaper 3-6. I'm overhead. I've got eyes on you. Stay low." Webb's voice crackled back, strained but controlled. "Reaper, I've got vehicles approaching from the north. 3 of them, maybe 2 kilometers out." Rachel had already seen them on her sensors. 3 BTR-80 armored personnel carriers moving fast. Each one could carry 8 soldiers. If they reached Webb, he was finished. She checked her weapons, 2 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. Precision-guided, designed for armor. In normal circumstances, enough to stop 2 vehicles. But not 3. And she had to make every shot count. "Viper 2-1, enemy armor approaching your position. I'm going to engage. When I do, you move east toward the ridgeline. There's better cover there. Understand?" "Roger." Standing by. Rachel lined up her first shot. The lead BTR was now 1,500 meters from Webb's position. Moving fast. She had one chance. She locked the target, confirmed the missile parameters, and fired. The Hellfire dropped from the Reaper's wing, its engine igniting, guiding itself toward the target using laser designation. Rachel kept the laser on target, hand steady despite the adrenaline. 5 seconds. 4, 3. The missile hit the BTR perfectly, striking the vehicle's side armor. The explosion was massive. The BTR stopped dead, smoke pouring from its hull. Direct hit. Webb's voice came through. You got him. Moving to engage second target. Start moving east. Now. Rachel watched on her sensor as Webb broke from cover, sprinting toward the ridgeline. The remaining 2 BTRs had stopped, confused by the strike. They didn't know where the attack had come from. She targeted the second BTR and fired her remaining Hellfire. Another direct hit. Another vehicle destroyed. But now she had a problem. 2 BTRs destroyed, but the third was still operational. And she was out of Hellfire missiles. The Reaper still carried 500-pound GBU, 12 paveway laser-guided bombs. Captain Hayes, you washed out of pilot training 3 times. Your body couldn't handle the G-forces. You couldn't sit in a fighter cockpit. But you just proved something I think the Air Force needs to understand. Being a pilot isn't about where you sit. It's about what you can do when lives are on the line. He opened the box. Inside was a medal, the Distinguished Flying Cross. This is awarded for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Captain, you earned this. And you earned something else. He pulled out another item, a set of pilot wings. The Air Force doesn't traditionally award wings to RPA operators, but I've submitted a request to change that policy because what you did was flying, real flying, and you deserve to be recognized as a real pilot. Rachel felt tears stinging her eyes. For 5 years, she'd carried the shame of failure, the weight of knowing she couldn't do what she'd always dreamed of. But standing there, holding those wings, she realized something. She'd been wrong. She hadn't failed. She'd just found a different way to fly. 3 months later, the Air Force approved the new policy. RPA operators who demonstrated exceptional skill in combat operations could be awarded pilot wings. Rachel Hayes was the first recipient. Captain Marcus Webb attended the ceremony. When Rachel received her wings, he stood and saluted, a gesture of respect from a fighter pilot to the woman who'd saved his life. She's a better pilot than me, Webb said later, in front of the entire wing. I fly an F-16 from a cockpit. She flew a Reaper from 400 kilometers away and executed the most precise CAS I've ever seen. If that's not flying, I don't know what is. Today, Rachel Hayes is a major in the United States Air Force, serving as an instructor at the RPA training school at Creech Air Force Base. She teaches new operators the same lessons she learned. Piloting isn't about where you sit or what aircraft you fly. It's about skill, precision, the ability to make life or death decisions under pressure, and the courage to prove that sometimes the best pilots never leave the ground. At the front of her classroom, there's a plaque with an inscription, awarded to Captain Rachel Hayes for exceptional airmanship in the face of impossible odds. Pilot wings earned not in a cockpit, but in a trailer 400 kilometers from the battlefield, proving that real pilots are defined by what they do, not where they do it. Moral of the story: your limitations don't define you, your determination does. Sometimes the path to your dream isn't the one you expected, and sometimes proving you belong means redefining what belonging looks like. Real excellence isn't about conforming to tradition. It's about showing what's possible when you refuse to give up. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Army Story for more true tales of courage, sacrifice, and the heroes who prove that strength comes in many forms. And sometimes, the person everyone doubted becomes the one everyone depends on. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the heroes among us.